And welcome to Lunch with Leaders. And we most assuredly have leaders in education here today to help us sort through discipline in our schools. But before we start, I have an important meeting for our members to announce, and that is on December the 4th at 5 o'clock at the office, 728 Monk Boulevard. We will be having a members meeting with the annual report to the members and election. And shortly, as soon as we finish that up, and also we'll have food and goodies. It will be a holiday celebration. We will join the rest of the community in lighting the lights in Baton Rouge. So put it on your calendar. Be sure to join us. It's a great time for all of us in Leaders with Vision. And those of you who are not members, please consider joining. This is a great group, and you see at the front desk one of the products of our work. And that is the voter's guide, which eliminated the mud and put the facts before you for the governor's race. I think all of us will be glad when this election season is over. Okay? Today we're here to talk about student discipline at a crossroads. For most of us, when we were growing up, parents, and teachers, and principals stood together. They were a powerful sorority, fraternity. Okay, is that better? Better, if I can hold it. We were a strong union of parents, teachers, principals. If you got in trouble at school, you were going to get in double trouble at home for disrespecting someone at school, whether that be the fight you got in with a colleague, or whether it was a teacher or a principal. The second thing you got in trouble for was embarrassing your family, your good family's name, that you could possibly act out like that in school. We need to find a way to reinstill that pride of family and discipline both at home and in the schools. Across the nation, this is becoming an increasing problem. And I can tell you right now, if we don't get discipline back in the homes and let it flow, discipline in the schools, allow our teachers and principals to maintain order in these schools, we're going to invite chaos in our society, which we already have a very solid taste of. Personally, I don't like it. So that's why we're here to discuss how can we put that genie back in the bottle. How can we teach the children to be disciplined, self-disciplined, and disciplined students with respect for all. For their fellow students, for their teachers, for their principal, and for authority in general. First on our program is Senator Sharon Weston Broome, who is President Pro Tem of the Louisiana Senate. And she introduced legislation last fall. Unfortunately, it was not successful. But she's here to discuss that and some other thoughts she might have. Would you please welcome Senator Broome. Sharon?
Okay, thank you so much. I love timekeepers.
How about you, too?
And so, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I thank Jean for her vision, if you will, in terms of offering an opportunity for a discussion, not just around this issue, but many issues as well. And so my involvement with this discussion today was really birthed out of the legislation that I not only passed and worked on in the 2015 session, but in the 2014 session as well. And I believe that all of us could probably agree that every child has a right to a quality education in a safe environment and that they should be treated with dignity. I think that we all agree that every teacher should have a safe environment to offer a quality education and that they should be treated with dignity as well. I believe that teachers, principals, superintendents, and parents must have a conversation surrounding the disparities that exist with school discipline. Statistics point very clearly that black students being suspended and expelled are being suspended and expelled at a rate 3 times greater than white students. And this is where the school to prison pipeline begins. How many of you all have ever heard the term school to prison pipeline or cradle to prison pipeline? I believe Marian Wright Edelman with the Children's Defense Fund is the person who really added volume to that description. And so my bill, Senate Bill 54, evolved out of an opportunity to minimize that school to prison pipeline. The bill originally set forth that students ages going from ages third grade to 5th grade, I'm sorry, 1st to 5th grade, would not be suspended or expelled for behavior that was not considered threatening. Now, this bill evolved as through a discussion and a resolution that took place, Senate Concurrent Resolution 134, which requested that the State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education examine and consider the status of school suspensions and expulsions. So Bessie did that. And after Bessie did that, the report did show that there were indeed some disparities in Louisiana with suspensions and expulsions. So my bill tried to just carve out a little section of that, minimizing suspensions and expulsions for children through the earlier grades so that they would have in-school suspensions for minor infractions. I will elaborate on that a little bit more as the clock is ticking, perhaps during our questions and answer period. But basically, we found out that during the 2013 school year, almost 19,000 elementary school students lost significant instructional time due to out-of-school suspensions. Also, we found out that the top reasons in 2013 and 2014 for suspensions and expulsions, pre-K through 12, had to do with let's do grades pre-K through 5. Willful disobedience, exhibiting injurious conduct, and disturbing the school and violating rules. Research has shown that children who miss school due to frequent suspensions run the risk of falling behind in their classwork and possibly failing their classes. Out-of-school suspension can result in a child's inability to actually correct or prevent their bad behavior. Children in grades kindergarten through 3rd grade fail to perceive out-of-school suspension as a punishment, and sometimes they think of it as a vacation for school. And so this bill originally said that schools could use alternative disciplinary actions such as revoking a child's privileges, referring them to a counselor or a social worker, and referring them to the response to the intervention program. As a result of opposition, the bill did pass, but it passed only including grades pre-kindergarten through 5th grade, I believe, that no one could be suspended or expelled for uniform infractions, which that is a very small part of the suspensions and expulsions spectrum. I have 12 seconds left and more than 12 seconds of material to share with you. So hopefully in my closing and during questions and answers, I can talk a little bit more at length about what I believe are some important solutions to minimizing suspensions and expulsions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Deborah Shum, who is the Louisiana Principals Association President. Deborah?
Thank you so much, and I have to say I agree with Senator Broom that we have to start conversations that involve everyone. They have to involve parents, they have to involve the community, principals, teachers, because we live in a society that has things happen on a very, very quick basis. You know, when you're in schools that everybody has cell phones or everybody has communication devices, you know, usually some people know it before you do when something happens in a school because they get the information out there that quick, which causes people to have to make what I'll say a decision based on whatever information they can gather at that point in time. What the biggest thing that has to happen to me to improve discipline and to make sure we have safe, positive school climates is we have to build respect for everybody in every position. Teachers have to be respected in the classroom, principals have to be respected in the job that they do, and we have to build that by involving parents and students, especially I'll say when you get to the high school level. If students are involved in knowing what consequences are, I shared with someone earlier, you know, we do a disservice to kids when we say, here's the rules that are here in our school, but when you get out in society, it's a different world. Because if we don't teach them in school what happens in society, then when they leave school, then they're at the whim of whatever they thought they could get away with. And then they get into the real life and find out that when you do things like that in the real world, you get arrested or something happens. So we have to have a balance of knowing how to use different programs. I definitely believe that using the PBIS, the Positive Behavior Intervention and Supports, is key to making a difference in schools. I think we have to start early. I don't think we can wait till they get to junior high school and high school and just say all of a sudden here are the rules. It has to start with students even involving character education. I think one of the things that we need to be able to work with is making sure that the environment for students who attend school is safe. As a parent of 3 children who attended public school, I want to make sure, just like everybody else in the community, that when my child attends school, they have the ability and opportunity to earn the best education possible. And a lot of times, that can't happen if the environment that they're in is not safe and that it's not conducive to them learning. So how do we build that? I think we do it by using programs like restorative practices. I know that recently I served on a committee in Jefferson Parish for strategic planning, and they worked with the DA's office to have the DA's office hire a full-time liaison with the school system that works with them on restorative practices. And it's all about making sure students understand that there are consequences for their actions. I know that we don't want to put kids out of school and have them lose school time, but we also don't want to have disruption in a classroom where students have disrupted, one kid disrupts what the 25 other kids in the class are trying to do. We have to have a balance. So when we do set up programs, and I agree with Senator Broom on that, we need to do more with positive behavior. We need supports. We need to make sure we're monitoring that. In the past, the LPOE had us actually giving grades to schools based on what their school climate and culture was and whether they had positive programs in place. I think we need to make sure, because it's the old adage of what gets monitored is what gets done, is really true. And when we don't look at that, that does not happen. So I think that's an area that we can definitely improve in. And I also think that when we set up the programs to make sure that we are helping students in school get the supports they need. Every school does not have a school social worker. Every school does not have a behavior interventionist. And even if we start early, if we start that's what's in place for at least starting out with Grace K-3, because it's all about the bottom line dollar. Where's the money spent? But I don't think that there's any parent or any person in the community that would say we shouldn't spend whatever it takes to make sure our kids are safe in school. I think we have to make sure that when we put those programs in place, we provide the supports by providing training to both teachers and administrators about the appropriate things to do. And then if it takes, in some cases, there are some students that we can't get to them by doing positive behavior, and we have to set up some type of a system, an alternative school. Our alternative school system, I think, needs to be readjusted. I've seen it in places, and we don't have enough supports in alternative schools to help kids make the right choices and know that when they go back to a regular school environment, that they have learned the coping skills not to get into that situation again. So, 3 basic things. Make sure that we give the supports to the schools, work on building a positive culture by involving everybody in the conversation and building a community of respect. And in cases where we don't have social workers or behavior interventionists, provide the support and funding that will put those in place. Thank you.
Next on the program is Debbie Moe, who is the president of the Louisiana Association of Educators, speaks for the teachers. Come on, Debbie. Would you welcome her?
Good afternoon. I'm Debbie Moe. I am a teacher out of the classroom from Vermilion Parish, serving as the president of the Louisiana Association of Educators. I want to kind of look at a paper that I found that discusses discipline issues from the National Education Policy Center. The researchers are from the Great Lakes Center and the Ford Foundation. That's where the funding comes from. And the paper is called Discipline Policies, Successful Schools, and Racial Justice. And they came up with 6 recommendations. One was to make sure that there is regular and correct data collected from all of our schools. A second was that civil rights enforcement agents should look at all of the information that is collected and bring the disparate suspensions and expulsions by race and gender and so forth to the school district's attention. They also say that when Congress reauthorizes the Elementary and Secondary Education Act and the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, it should make sure that there are positive incentives for schools, districts, and states to support students, teachers, and school leaders in systematic improvements to classroom and behavior management, especially where your expulsions and suspensions are high. Another is that federal and state policy should specify the rate of out-of-school suspensions as one of the several factors to be considered in assessments of school efficacy, especially for low-performing schools. And I do want to point out to all of you and ask you to go to the internet and look up the NEA Opportunity Dashboard. One of the things that we are really focusing on right now is making sure that the new ESEA is going to use multiple points of evaluation for school scores. And this could be definitely one of those points. They also suggest that the discipline data should be one of those points along with graduation rates, teacher effectiveness, college readiness, etc. And that system-wide improvements should be pursued through better policies and practices at all levels, including all efforts to improve teacher skills and classroom and behavior management in the school system. And that's really what I want to talk about. I do know what restorative justice is and restorative practices in the classrooms are. I did send an email to you, Senator Broom, that I do believe in it, but I think that we don't have it well funded. Not every school system can put in place those supports for students and the parents that are really necessary. As a teacher, I remember those in my younger days, my less experienced days, just being outdone with students and not taking the time to find out what it was that was motivating their behavior. As I gained my experience, I learned to do that. I think that there is training that we can offer our teachers to help them understand what they need to do when there are behavior problems within their classrooms. I think that there are educational programs that need to be started in our community to help parents, number one, learn parenting skills. One of the things that we all know is that everyone can have a child, but no, not everyone is ever taught how to parent. I know I wasn't. I learned it by trial and error. And my kids will tell you that sometimes there was more error than success. We need to make sure that we have those supports for our parents and also our teachers in our community. One thing I do want to say, however, is that when there are times that you have discipline problems in a classroom that endanger the safety of children and or the teacher, we do need a mechanism that allows the teacher to remove that child from the classroom and make sure that that child is given the supports and the rehabilitation, whatever may help that child, psychological counseling, perhaps an alternative setting. We need to make sure that those things are available for our children. Otherwise, we end up with teachers who are frustrated and children who aren't learning. So I would ask that we look at what is good for all involved, the children, the parents, the communities, but also the individual teachers in the classrooms and the individual schools. Thank you.
Thank you, and at this time, we'll call upon Bob Wertz with the Louisiana Commission on Law Enforcement, who trains the school resource officers. Is that correct? That is, okay.
All police officers.
Okay, resource officers, okay? Would you welcome Bob Wertz?
Thanks for inviting me here. My role is a little broader than just school resource officers. My section is responsible for training all peace officers in Louisiana. And needless to say, my phone's been busy the last 2 weeks with media requests about certain situations in our state. But this morning we're here to talk about school resource officers. It's a relatively new position enacted by the legislature in the say 10 years ago. The requirements for school resource officers are that they be a certified peace officer at a level 1. That is, they have the full rights of a peace officer. But their role in the schools are a little bit different. And I'm going to give you just a quick overview of what they're required to do. And we sort of draw the line about what they do and they don't do. They're there to be a role model in those schools. And they are set up to work collaboratively, whether their employee and agency is like a police department or a sheriff's department. It's a joint effort between the school boards in that particular parish and the law enforcement agency, depending on what it is. Here in Baton Rouge, we have the sheriff's office and we have the constable who are involved with DARE and school resource officer programs. So they've got to be a level 1 peace officer. They've got to have 2 years experience in law enforcement. They're required to wear their complete uniform while they're on duty in the schools. And their primary role is to assist the faculty and the students and parents in the community to make sure that everything is on the up and up. Quickly, I'll say they are not a school disciplinarian. So what you saw on TV in the last 2 weeks with what happened in South Carolina, that's not the role that we teach our school resource officers to take. They're not there to enact discipline. And the previous speakers have mentioned that discipline is a problem in the schools. I've talked to school resource officers as late as one this week, and I asked him about some of the things that he's encountered, and I'm going to get to some of those problems and concerns that he has in his own schools. SROs interact with students. They serve as liaison between the school boards and the law enforcement agencies in their area. They take enforcement action as required. They make themselves available for conferences between students, parents, faculty members where necessary. They help enforce school rules, including monitoring school student movement, particularly if there are unwanted guests or intruders on the school, and there's the potential for some kind of action. What are the biggest problems that school resource officers encounter? There are three major problems. Two are the primary ones. One is bullying, and the second is sexting. And so for us, it's how do we get school boards, how do we get teachers, and even us as trainers involved in order to reduce the incidences of bullying. Some of the school shootings you've seen around the country, I go back and I read the reports, and sometimes a lot of cases, when you get to the root cause, it happens to be that those shooters were bullied by their schoolmates or peers or what have you. So we begin to intervene on some of that. And sexting in Colorado, for example, just in the last month or two, we have a school where the students used a smartphone app to take pictures of themselves without their clothes on and share those pictures with the members of their class, and they did that in a way that no one knew until somebody happened to spill the beans. And so this for us is not an issue of child pornography, it's an issue of students, minors we're talking about, who don't really understand the ramifications of what that could be. I suspect we're going to have some tweaking, and Senator Broom's probably aware of this, in our laws dealing with sexting. We've already done that initially, so we don't have high school kids labeled as felons that are sex offenders. I think the legislation initially addressed that. It does not do that now, but we're probably going to need some more work in that area. It's going to take a lot of community effort to support that kind of legislation so that we take care of protecting our students at the same time as eliminating the problem. The other thing I'll mention is active shooters. The advanced course in school resource officers is conducted on a school. We actually go through the steps of what happens if you have an active shooter, what to do about it, how to go about it. It's a role-playing exercise. We hope that we don't have that kind of situation here, but never say never. We never thought we'd have a mass shooting, and we had one right over here in Lafayette. So it can happen anytime, anywhere. So what are some quick things that we could do? One of the things that the officer mentioned to me is that they no longer have a fence officer in his parish. He's from Point Crepee Parish. He said the fence officer was able to come in and help navigate and settle a lot of family disputes, particularly when the parents were not supporting their kids going to school. He said, and for us, it's going to take some community support to help Senator Broom. If you want to restore a fence to the level that it was in the past, it's going to take funds, and it's funds that the state doesn't have right now. It's going to need broader community support. The last thing I suggest is social contracts. That there be, I know I'm almost out of time, social contracts. Get the parents to promise to send their kids to school, teach respect for teachers and peace officers, and then know the consequences of when they don't and what's going to happen. What the officer told me, one of the biggest things he does is he goes to the student's home. If they're not there at school, wakes the parents up, tells them to get their kids up, and then get their kids to school. He actually takes them to school. So that's the kind of steps, that's the kind of things that we may need to consider doing. And it all is a much broader than just an issue of money. There you go.
Dr. Carrie Azeed was not able to come today, but in our audience, we have a gracious social worker who is going to share her program with us. Her name is Bethany Scalafani. Please welcome her.
I work at Capital Area Human Services District. I am the program manager of a school-based therapy program. We have social workers in 32 schools in Baton Rouge and the 6 surrounding parishes. We serve a caseload of students, and about 25 students in the schools that we serve have the most challenges. So we're kind of seeing that top tier of the PBIS triangle. We work with prescribers that come to the schools to provide medication that is warranted if the family wants it. We work very closely trying to bridge the school and the family. Some of our parents didn't have great experiences when they were in school, so they're not usually eager to come up when we call for them. We try to really build that relationship and get them involved in the school. We work very closely with the teachers as well, trying to help support them. Some new teachers aren't quite sure sometimes how to manage certain behaviors that they're seeing in their students, so we can provide suggestions. Basically, we see our caseload at least once a week for therapy. That's pretty much what we do. We're very busy, and I wish there were more of us and we could serve more schools. Just really excited to be here today. Thank you all for doing this. It's a topic close to my heart. I'm so excited. Thank you.
Thank you for stepping in. Unfortunately, due to funding, we don't have a social worker in every school or an interventionist. And that's something that, as we face this horrendous problem at the legislature called the budget, please let your legislator know how important it is for young children to have safe environments, in an environment they can learn. And that would mean putting back some of the things that have been stripped of our schools. Tell your school board that, and tell your legislature. Yes, John?
I want to question, has anybody on the panel up there addressed the idea of how many of these children that would have problems have both parents at home rather than single parent families, some father's missing, some mother's missing? Anybody looking into that?
Single-parent homes are a prevalent issue with students who don't, and that's why in schools today, schools have had to become much more broad in the services they provide. And I think that one of the things that we do is we try to make sure that we involve, and in many cases, if it's not the parent, it may be the grandparent or the members of the family that are going to help make that particular individual. I talked with a principal today, and she's written a book, and it talks about, think about the 30 individuals that your child interacts with. It may not be individuals 1 through 29 that you have to worry about. It might be number 30, because you have to make sure you involve all of the levels. So I think one of the things that has to happen, and when I was speaking earlier, we have to have a community response. It can't just be that the school can do it on its own, or in many cases, because we have so many single-parent families, that the single parent can handle the entire group. But we have to make sure that everybody is held accountable and that there are consequences when students don't, I would say don't react or don't gain positive interventions, so that we can make sure that the classroom is safe for all of the students in the school. And I think that's where the gray line happens. The gray line is you have to make decisions based on what you think is best for the majority of the people in the building. And when we have to do that, we have to have support services. And in many cases, when parents are single parents, they can't take time off from work to be able to get there. But we have to have programs in place that can help do that. And that's, to me, educating the community and employers. You know, many employers do allow parents to leave to attend to children's issues or concerns at school, but then we have some employers who don't allow any release time. That would be very simple, I think, guidelines. If you want people to be involved, you have to allow people to work when it's talking about the education of the child.
And so let me connect to that in a more extended fashion, if you will. These are some facts. More than 1 in 4 school-age children live in poverty in Louisiana. 27% of school-age children live in poverty in Louisiana. We have the 4th highest child poverty rate in the nation. Now, you as educators, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir a little bit here, but we have to understand that there's a correlation between poverty and the academic success of our children. And when we have such a high rate of poverty, we cannot afford to disconnect that significant component from the discussion. Now, I'm going to tell you what I believe that is a key solution to a lot of what we're talking about here today. And this is probably going a little farther than the content or focus of our discussion today, but I believe it is directly connected. And that is the fact that the first 3 years of life are a window of opportunity or vulnerability. And until we as a state, as a community, as educators, as principals, you name it, until we realize the significance and importance of early childhood development, and I'm not talking about pre-K, it's late then. We're late then. I mean, everybody is talking about, and has been, the importance of 0 to 3 development. And we as a state are not making that kind of investment. So we're starting late. And a lot of that is directly connected to the issue of discipline in schools. It's directly connected to the success of students. Early Head Start currently reaches only 5% of eligible children. That's early Head Start. 10 to 14% of children under 5 years old, experience social and emotional problems. So, my friends, we have got to unite around the importance of 0 to 3 development if we want to start seeing changes take place in our school from pre-K through 12th grade. And so my encouragement and my exhortation to all of us is that we broaden our discussion, and that we need the teachers saying this, and we need, principals and educators, community leaders, business people. We all need to rally around this fact, or we're going to still be discussing solutions, and I believe some of the solutions that have been offered here today are certainly viable and important solutions. But we've got to get to the core. We've got to get to the core of some of these problems. And so that's my, I would say my wrap up, my encouragement. But I still, I'm open for questions, but that's where I am, and I think that's where we need to be as a state. We need to look at our budget. I'm for teachers getting raises. I'm for empowering teachers, classrooms, all of that. But we've got to look more strategically at our budget. And I know we don't have much money to look strategically at, but we've got to look more strategically in terms of how we can make wise investments that benefit all of us as a state and a community in the long run. And I believe one of the wisest investments that we can make is in early childhood development from babies to 3 years old. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. When Debbie Moe was speaking, she brought up the Michigan study. And Debbie, I have a question, and I'm going to take a point of personal privilege. You mentioned that they were rating kids according to gender and according to race. But my question is there a category in which they evaluate the children based on family income, regardless of gender and regardless of race? It should be done there, and afterwards you can break it out into gender and race. Could you respond to that, please? But it disturbs me because we do this blanket and everybody starts thinking racial things, and I'm sick of that. I want to see us look at what the real cause is, which is poverty.
Well, I'm not as versed in this as you might think I am, but I do know that in my experience, children do come into your classrooms, our classrooms, as products of their homes. And you can tell the difference between children who are raised in socially, economically deprived homes versus those who have more of the opportunities that money can offer them. I do not believe that we have a category where we, or at least the federal government doesn't sanction a category that actually defines who these children are and what are the deprivations that they suffer educationally as well as economically.
The reason for the question is I think we find in our public school system or any other school system that it is more a measure of economic status rather than the race or the gender. And I think to be fair and honest to the taxpayers so that they get a true picture, we need to evaluate this. Who's being expelled? What was that education? What was that economic level? So we can get to the source of the problem so people can get out of denial and start doing something about the root problems.
Yes, most families that don't have a great deal of economic status or money coming into the family often are absent parents because they have to be employed at several jobs. And so the children are missing the initial teaching that comes from the home. They come into our classrooms and they are a little bit lost as to how they socially integrate with everyone else because they don't have the parents at home fostering and building those coping skills and those skills that they need to interact with other children. One of the things that I do want to bring out is that our grading system for our schools and our school districts and our states, the ESEA grading system is relying on a test score. And I know that Mr. Mike Destel is here in the audience with us, and he's done a great deal of research based on the fact that the scores that a lot of our children achieve and therefore are translated into scores for the schools and the districts and the states really are more a measure of the poverty in which the children are brought up in. If they aren't getting supported at home with homework, with emphasis on education, then they are not bringing that with them into the classroom. It's not that these children aren't intelligent. They most certainly are. It's just their opportunities are so much more limited than children who come from families that can provide those opportunities because they bring in more money into the family. So I think that poverty really is the measure of what we're seeing in the scores. The school performance scores, even children's scores on their own tests, the scores that translate to what the school district is graded as. It is poverty to a certain degree. Is that the only factor? No. But I think it is a huge factor.
Thank you. It's good to hear that since we did have we have on video Superintendent John White saying poverty is not his problem. Yes, sir.
I have a question. Have there ever been any studies done that show a correlation between a school that's in an area that's not high poverty and a school that is an area that is of high poverty? Looking at the type of suspensions, does the high poverty school, the kids get suspended for things that happen at a more affluent school that kids don't get suspended for? Have any of those correlations ever been found?
Yeah. No, they're coming here.
I can't cite studies, but I have read that there are school districts, because of the high poverty rate, and depending on who is in leadership, who is in the classroom, that does happen. There are places where children are expelled or suspended at a higher rate because of their background. I can't cite the studies. I think I probably need to defer to Debbie Schoen, who probably can. But I can tell you that there is a difference. You can walk into a school that is in a high socioeconomic area and tell the difference. The climate is very different from those schools that you walk into that are in a low socioeconomic area. And I would say also that don't get support from the communities or from their school districts. We hear a lot about schools with wraparound services. I think that that is the model, the community school model, that we need to move to. Because if we can support the parents and we can support the children, they are going to achieve. We just aren't providing it.
Okay. So I'm going to probably differ maybe just a little bit on that piece. I don't think that there is an exact study that has shown the difference between suspensions and expulsions depending on economic status. I do know that Debbie's right that there is research that shows that in where there's a lower SES, there tends to be more suspensions or expulsions. But I do think that that can be balanced depending on what that school system does to deal with it. And I say that prior to serving as a principal, as the executive director for Louisiana Association of Principals, I worked for the state, and I also worked in the Recovery School District in New Orleans. And when we were in those schools in New Orleans, right after Katrina, I was the chief academic officer, and we had some schools that had some significant issues. But we actually partnered with a group called Communities in Schools, where we had social workers and members of City Corps come in and actually work with the students and the teachers and the families. So I think it's actually more about the level of support that is provided as opposed to where once you fall in that area. So if the support can be provided, I think that there can be a transformation of what those students are able to move to. Unfortunately, because those schools are in low SES, usually those schools have lack of funds to actually provide those services. So it's sort of what I'll call a vicious cycle. How do we get out of it? Well, we have to provide funding to get the supports, because I think if the supports are in place, that there is an opportunity for schools to pull out of that mode.
And so I'm going to try to connect with your question as well, and then I want to kind of piggyback on something that Jean said. And certainly we can look, I believe that there are studies out there that show everything these days, so we just have to locate an accurate study, I will say that. But I will say what is still very troubling for me as a policymaker and as a leader is that the statistics still show that here in Louisiana that there is indeed a disproportionate share of black students who are more likely than their white peers to receive in-school, out-of-school, or alternative site suspensions for even habitual tardiness or absence. I mean, there's data that shows that. There's also data that shows that 64 willful disobedience incidents as it relates to things like minor infractions like talking in class or uniform violations, that the students who were suspended were 64% African Americans, and they only make up 34% of their school population. So we could still correlate that perhaps, Jean, with the issues of poverty, the economy or economic outcomes of families. But the bottom line is there's still a disproportionate number of African American students who are being suspended and expelled. And that's just the reality. That's just the facts. Now I think we can work on that with some of the things that have been said here today. I think we can work on it just because of having an elevated awareness and sensitivity to the issue now. But that is what is happening, and to me that shows that that there's something that needs to still be addressed and pinpointed that's taking place. Once again, I bring out the fact that even when we talk about the early childhood development, that there's still a disproportionate number of babies who are racial and ethnic minorities who have a lack of resources. And so all of it is still, it's still connected. So I would, once again, encourage us to look very closely at the outcomes. Look at the outcomes and then look at some core solutions that we can address as we move forward. I heard Debbie say earlier about restorative justice practices and the absence of funding. And we all know that we are probably in some of the worst budget times that we've ever had in the history. I don't know if that might be a little exaggeration when I say the history of our state, but we're in some tight budget straits. And so once again, positive practices like restorative justice practices get left out of the equation. And so it's incumbent upon educators, community leaders, parents, everyone to come to the table and say, and define what are the priorities for us as a community that wants to reach education and academic success for all of our students.
Let me address a little bit of your question this way. One of the things I do, there's several things I do besides just this role. I teach over at the University of Phoenix. One of my colleagues is here today. And I'll share a story that I had with a student probably about 5 or 6 years ago. And he wanted to help address some of the concerns that were going on. It was at that time it was Prescott Middle School. And they wanted to get corporate assistance. And I said, what are you willing to offer to get from the school's point of view? And he said, well, I don't know. I said, well, let's think out loud for a minute. And we call these conversations for possibilities. This is an active conversation about the direction we want to go, but we're not sure of how to get there. And the conversation, the long and short of it is this. I said, you have to have something to offer from where you are at the school. You're going to walk in the door and you're going to talk to the director of the Exxon facility here in Baton Rouge. I said, you've got to have a plan of what you want to do and how you want to do it. You're going to ask for their help, and they're going to ask specifically what it is they can do to help you. I said, so you have to have some things in place in order to do that. And we talked about some possibilities of things he could do. I said, well, the faculty isn't organized. I said, well, what I'd suggest you do is you go talk to the most respected teacher at that school, the one that everyone else looks up to. And every school has somebody who's, held in high regard, high esteem by their colleagues. I said, do you know somebody like that over there? He said, well, as a matter of fact, I do. I said, well, what you do is you go over there and you persuade her, like you persuaded me and the rest of the members of this class, about what it is that you want to do. And you get her involved in helping spearhead this. And then the next step is you want to get the parents, if you can. So you hold a meeting at night. Maybe it's a covered dish, whatever it takes, in order to get those parents to help begin the process of supporting the school. You're not going to get everybody. That's not necessarily your goal. The thing that you want to do is open the door and get them there so that they all can participate. This is where everyone has community involvement, even if they're not right in that particular neighborhood. And we're not talking about money necessarily. We're talking for them. It's a matter of them having the ability to feel like they've got some input into that school. Then you get the principal involved, and then you go up to the school board level. But if you don't have yourself organized at the school level, then you're not going to be in a position to do that. You're going to need the principal eventually, but you got to get everyone on board one step at a time. And as you do that, then you have the case to go over there and have a conversation with forget what the gentleman's name is, what his position is, but it's the director of the Exxon facility for Baton Rouge, the refinery, not the chemical plant. I said, then you can have that conversation so that you can secure some assistance from them. And they've since, I think, they've been adopted by one of the organizations here in town. But that's kind of the process that it goes. And so even if there is a school where the kids are economically disadvantaged, one way to address that is this vehicle. Now, keep in mind, we're talking out loud here in a conversation of about an hour and a half. And I'm going through with him and the other members in the class about the steps they can take to do this. It wasn't necessarily about collecting money or donations per se from the people or the parents of the school, but the whole process was starting a conversation for possibility is the technique that it's called, to move in a position where we could begin to design something that was a little different, that would bring that school up from where it was. And we begin to identify what is it they need in order to function as the schools, let's say, that we went to school with, because the schools that exist today are not nearly what they were when I went through school, which is always amazing for me. It's like, why aren't they? So, anyways, that's the long and short of that story. The point of me going through this was just to show you there's another way besides just getting money, but getting, at that point, the next step would get policymakers like Senator Broom and others involved, because when you build a passion, she's already got the passion, you can see it here today. When you get others involved in the same passion, you can lead them in the direction that we need to go.
Thank you. Mike?
I'd like to discuss the panel from the point of view of teachers. I write a blog for educators, called the Louisiana Educator, and you'd be surprised how many comments I get from educators who are having serious problems with classroom management. And the most common thing they tell me when they write me emails and they say, don't use my name and all that, is they say, the administration always tells us when we have a disruptive problem in our classroom or a disruptive student, they tell us what we can't do. You can't touch the child. You can't do this. You can't do that, and so on. Be sure you follow the PBIS program, and be sure you have enough evidence before you do anything. The teachers are just tearing out their hair saying, we've been told everything we can't do, but nobody has told us a single thing that we can do to stop that problem in our classroom. And it is disrupting hundreds of classrooms all over this state. And all we hear is the other side saying, let's find some way to counsel that disrupted student. I'm worried about the other kids in the classroom that are not getting an education because we have some serious disruption in the classroom. What kind of comment do you get? What can the teachers do?
Got it.
Just add something to this question. One of the things about tracking the data on suspensions and expulsions is that it ends up being a disincentive to disciplining the way. I thought one of the things you were saying, Mike, was that you have kids returning to the classroom after they've been to the administration to be disciplined, they're back in the classroom. What can be done? So what, piggybacking on what he says, and I think we can answer it all together, is one of the things that administrators can do and teachers can do that wouldn't be a disincentive to tracking that data. What are the other things that they could do that we should be tracking in schools that would tell us how discipline's being handled other than suspensions and being effective?
So you want a can-do done?
Yeah, it's kind of what you said. We sort of have our hands tied, but yeah, there ought to be a way to do it.
Debbie, you have any comment on that? Is there a can-do guide?
I think the can-do guide has to be put together by the schools and the school districts. Possibly the state can help too. But I do know that on the national level, NEA, as I told you earlier, has a document called the Opportunity Dashboard. One of the things that we're doing right now with all of the scores that our students, our teachers, our schools, our school districts, states, whatever, are having to bear is the fact that they are based on one element, and that's a test score. NEA has the Opportunity Dashboard, and it's divided into 3 sections. And there's 22 indicators that would give us a better idea of the health of our schools. One is on student success, other is quality educators, and then quality schools. One of the things that we are continuing to do, which I think is just wrong, is that we are hanging all of our hopes and dreams on a test score. We're reducing kids and teachers to test scores. And everything that we do has to improve the test score. We are test factories. Everything we do in the classroom is geared towards a test. We are not educating the whole child. So what we need to do is figure out what are the elements that indicate a good school that gives students an opportunity of success, that encourages and builds quality educators. And if we do that, I think we'll end up with quality schools. But those indicators are in that document that I just referenced. And will all of these indicators be appropriate for Louisiana? I don't know. It's something that's worth looking at, though. We need to figure out a different way, rather than putting all of our eggs in the test basket.
Are you saying you want to say that?
So I'm going to just share from the point I think I tried to make earlier about respect. I think there has got to be a balance of respect between teachers and the administrators, between parents and administrators and teachers, and between students. Knowing that we respect, and we have to start early, because I really agree with what you said, Senator Rue. If we don't start early, the kids, by the time they're in 3rd grade, already have learned these habits that you have to unlearn or help them replace the behaviors. It's a lot easier if they start out with the right behavior in the beginning, and we don't have to do replacement behavior. But I want to share just a brief statement. I had a student one time who walked into my office and said, Michelle, you would smile and suspend me. And I said, if it called for that. I said, but the fact that you know that I would follow the rules says we shouldn't have to have this issue. I'm not trying to suspend you. But the kid knew that. So consequently, we had an issue in the gym where a student was in a big fight. I walked into the gym. The kid had just picked up, a big kid, had just picked up and body slammed a kid on the floor of the gym, which was not a wood floor, it was a floor like this. And I walked up to him, put my hand on his arm, and the kid walked away with me and said, you're going to come with me now to my office. Because I knew he did not want to. Because if he had picked up the kid and did it again, we might have had a really serious issue. It was bad enough. How I got him to come with me, to this day, I'm not real sure. But I know that it was partly because he believed I had his best interest at heart. Because what I wanted to do was get him out of the situation. There was 100 kids in the gym all watching to see what he was going to do next. And I knew I needed to remove him. But I think part of what we have to do is build that situation where the respect is there both between teachers and administrators and within the community. And then we have to show kids there's a consequence. I know of a school that, an alternative program. And we have to make sure our alternative programs, because we invest money in that. And I agree with what Mr. Wertz, we don't have to spend a lot of money, but we have to set priorities that say, this is what we want to have happen. And when you set priorities, whatever funding is there, priority number 1 gets the top dollar. So we have to set the priority. And what they did in this school was they made sure that students understood that from the get-go, education and non-disruptive behavior was what was valued. So what happened if a kid disrupted a class and had to be removed for that minute? However minutes he was out of that class, that's how many minutes he had to stay after school. to make sure he made up his instructional material. Now, did it cost them a little because they had to have somebody stay after to do that? Did they get the message? Yes. So I think we have to be careful about making sure the message that we send to students and parents is that respect is first, and that we have to have an environment where students understand that education is important and will help them in the future. And if we don't change our priorities and make sure that our alternative programs are really programs that aren't where kids are just sent to buy time, because that's what happens a lot. They go to a center for alternative schools and they think, okay, I'm here for 6 weeks or 6 months. It's sort of like the jail issue. They think I do my time here, I go back, but my behavior did not change. So when I go back to the regular school, then I'm back in the same situation again. We have to make sure the programs, that we have priority on what is important about making sure the behavior is what we have worked with, not just removing a kid for a classroom just to get them out of the way.
Before I give Senator Broom the mic, I'd like to say you brought up a very interesting issue. We call respect. And I am so glad that East Baton Rouge Parish decided to have uniforms, because I remember walking to school and trying to figure out who was the teacher and who were the kids. I suggest that it would be a marvelous improvement for these teachers' associations to have the kids have a dress code. Let's have the teachers go in there and respect the students by showing up like you ladies did today, dressed and you're with your authority and asking for the respect by how you dress. That means an awful lot. If you don't believe it, put a nun's costume on and walk in front of a class. It'll terrify everybody. I'm not asking you to terrify them. I'm just trying to drive a point. Please dress like a teacher who is there with responsibility and authority. It means a lot to those kids to be respected too.
I agree with you to a certain point. I don't know if uniforms for teachers would be, yeah. But one of the things that I think is missing for especially our 0 to 5 year teachers, possibly some beyond that, is mentorship. We have a really good mentor program with the LATAP program, which the State Department has done away with, and has said that the mentors are now the lead teachers in each of the schools. There are 4 of them in each of the schools, supposedly. But I can tell you that our teachers that are not being assigned to those seasoned, versed teachers and how to run a classroom and helping those new teachers to become acclimated to their surroundings and their profession, that is a big, big hole in our system. We don't do that anymore unless the local district is doing it in place of the state. There are some places, some locals that do. I know that we had a very strong program. I was a mentor in my district when I was teaching there, but my last year or so, they completely did away with the program. The district was not able to pick it up financially. So most of our new teachers come into the schools there and they have no one to help them unless there's a teacher there that says, I will help you. We need to have some kind of a systematic mentorship for our teachers. That will help them in a lot of the problems that they face in the classroom.
Let me clarify the confusion. I'm not looking for the teachers to wear uniforms. I just want them to dress professionally.
Mr. Wertz told us a story about Mr. Wertz told us a story. I want to make a statement. Mr. Wertz told us a story about civic collaboration. That is, he was saying people who want to get something done need to talk to each other, decide what it is they want to do, and then discuss how to get it done, and then go to the big wheel and say, we want this done. Okay? I would like to make a proposal. I really like Ms. Bloom's idea that this thing needs to be taken back to age 6 months and brought forward to the school. I would like to suggest that everybody here who's interested in this get together at a library meeting and collaborate on this Boone's idea. How can a civic people take charge of this disciplinary problem, which is originating from age 0 to 6? What can we do? And then let Ms. Boone be our spokesman to take it to the state of Louisiana.
Shirley, would you pull out a piece of paper, and everybody that's interested in following on Phil's excellent suggestion, please sign up over there along with your contact information, and we'll be in touch. We'll help set the meeting up. Is that good with you, Chairman? Yes.
If I can, I'm a behavior strategist in my district at schools, also / mentor, also / working with the resource office and alternative. So this is my wheelhouse for activity. One of the things that we have is a compilation of what the issues are. One, our teachers are all almost in terror of what my test scores. I'm validated, I'm promoted or demoted based on my school's test scores. So when I have issues in the classroom that are behavioral oriented, it's easier to make those numbers raise up with certain dynamics to remove instead of redirect and remote.
Excellent.
So what we need, to Ms. Mo's point, is, and what my role is, I'm a mentor. I'm the interventionist that goes in and say, let's redirect. Let's remove if necessary with a good resource officer who's in tune and is a role model, as you said, and bring them into an environment. We've done something like called behavior academies, where that student is removed from the class and put into another type classroom environment. They get the same work, they have the same accountability. But we go in there and we teach respect. We teach what is willful disobedience. We teach what is instigating, what is bullying, as part of their learning process. So you have to have a filter, if you will, in this, to go from, because if I'm a teacher and I've been taught curriculum, I don't go through the process of dealing with what we call behavior management, because I was taught to teach. So a lot of we do with our PLCs and our professional developments. I was honored to go to East Baton Rouge at their climate control Region 2 conference on Tuesday and asked me to come in and talk on what it's all about for building climate. It's about relationships. You don't get good positive discipline, you don't get good learning until your teachers and administrative staff understand how to develop relationships. So I teach about how do you deal with students that come from poverty? How do students react when they are children of incarcerated parents? That's a whole different dynamic as to what they define respect is. And not respect. As a student who saw an incident happen on the campus, respect to me, if I got incarcerated parents, you don't snitch. Because that's the code I was raised. Where another student has said, this is going to help a situation, I'm going to report something that's a danger to our campuses. So I think if we can get that mentoring piece to be something that we can support, and I know funding, listen, I was a former FINS director, and I was there when the cuts came, so I understand what FINS was all about. FINS was a valid part. We told our judges, we got to make the parents accountable for the actions of the children. And we have, the other thing I'll say real quick is that we have to find a way that our school doesn't just become in our community, but our schools become a part of our community. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Thank you.
Very much so. Yes, sir.
I have a question concerning the discussion about school letter grading and not everything that success should be determined. And I guess the question I wonder is, how far back do you pull off on the letter grading? So I'm a parent who sends my child to school, and that child graduates from high school and goes to college and have to take remedial classes because they did not receive what they received in that high school. But because we back off of letter grades, everybody's happy at school, so it must be in school. So I'm just trying to understand, what's that trade-off between knowing that my child is getting what they need so that they are competing with other children, not just in Louisiana, but across the United States and the world, that they can successfully.
It's not an either or. It's an addition. There are 22 factors in that dashboard that I talked about, and I would invite you to go to the internet, it's on the internet, and look at it. All of the things that you're talking about are in the student success, dual enrollment, IB classes, AP classes. All of that is in here. But it's not the only factor. Right now, We are grading our kids, we are grading our teachers, we are grading our schools and our school districts by test scores. Almost exclusively. There is graduation rate, there are a few other little things that are involved. But the major thrust of that score is a test or tests. I don't believe that that is what we are wanting our children to go out there and be able to do. We're not going to send them out to take tests. We want to make sure that they're well adjusted. We want to make sure that they are happy in school, that they understand how to get along with one another, collaborate with one another. Those are things that are important. So I won't go through all the indicators. There are 22 of them. Most of them are on quality educators. So there's a higher standard for the educators themselves. Then next is student success, the indicators that would lead children to be successful. And then quality schools. You know, what can the schools and school districts be responsible for? So it's an all-inclusive. We don't want to abdicate our responsibilities as teachers or as school districts, but we have to have, there has to be a much greater input. It can't be just the teachers. It can't be just tests. It has to be all of the factors that lead to a successful adult. So that's my answer.
And you can find that at NEA.org.
Yeah, NEA, if you just put NEA opportunity dashboard in, you'll come up.
Yes, ma'am.
After listening to this group for the last hour, it sounds as though we are people that want our schools to function like they need to function. However, that has been taken away from us for many reasons, but it is going to take the voice of the people, the leadership on Bessie and in our House and in our Senate, and people just like this gentleman over here, wherever he is, that suggests he's coming to the bathroom, that suggested that we get together. That is what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to insist that we take our schools back, because the mentorship program, the special ed department, there have been so many things that have been taken away from our school system in the last 3 to 4 years that were gems. They were working beautifully. I wanted to ask Mike, if I could, about the standards right before the reform of the Common Core Initiative came in. I had understood that our progress was improving, and I wanted to ask you if that's accurate information, because I believe in you. I know that you do probably more research than anybody I know. Is that not correct?
Yeah, and also to address the person
Stand
who
up.
mentioned,
Stand up. You're not making that better.
my name is Michael Distel. I'm a retired educator, and I do a lot of research on our standards and what goes on in our schools. And to the person who mentioned the concern about making sure that our kids are ready to go on to the next step, college or whatever, it turns out the exact opposite is happening in our State Department of Education. They have actually lowered all of the standards for passing various grades. Did you know, for example, you've been told that the bar has been raised by adopting the Common Core standards and the new testing regime that we have. Did you know, for example, that a student can pass the 8th grade math test now by getting only 22% of the answers correct on the test? Did you know that you can pass geometry in high school by getting only 32% of the answers correct on the geometry test? And you might say, well, how did that happen? Well, we don't quite know, because the State Department secretly changed the scores. They only present to us as citizens what they call scale scores. The scale scores have very little relationship to the true scores that the students are making on our tests. So what's happened is there's such a push now, and Ms. Freiberg, as a school board member, you know that there's such a push now to graduate all students, no matter what, that we're ending up, the State Department of Education is the main culprit in lowering the standards so that every kid can pass on. And we even have situations, I talked about the frustration of teachers when a student doesn't want to behave. We even have teachers who come to us and say, this particular student, I told him that he's failing my class. And the student said, well, I don't have to worry because I've been told that I can take a credit recovery course and sit in front of a computer for a couple of days and I will pass that way. So to answer your question, we are actually lowering the standards in the name of raising the bar. But the average person doesn't know about it because the real scores are being kept secret. And only through a public records request, I've had to file 3 lawsuits, actually 4. 4 lawsuits against the State Department of Education just to get information that should have been available to all of us. And 3 of them have been decided so far in my favor, and I've gotten the information, but it's so late. I've gotten it so late that it's hardly worth anything anymore. We are being misled, folks, by the idea of higher standards. And I'm in agreement with the folks who don't believe that everything in the school should be rated by student test scores. Because you have so many schools where what you need is to instill discipline, to instill a motivation to do well in life. And it doesn't mean that everybody in that school is going to score an A. It just means that they're going to progress as much as we can get them to progress. That's what we ought to be focusing on.
Well, I just want to say that I work in the school system, and I am in meetings every day with parents, with teachers, with administration, and our teachers are demoralized, our children are so frustrated. By the way, we're the #2 state in the nation for medicating our school-age children, and that has risen. I'm not saying we didn't always have an issue with that, but that has risen, and we ask ourselves why. Okay.
No, I was going to say is, I'd like to see a show of hands of how many people are willing to back what we talked about here by coming to meetings and joining the Committee for Reform. Please raise your hand. All right, sign up over there and we will be in touch and set them up. Oh, Karen, you're going to be there. All right, Terry, you want something?
I've been trying to say something. I've deferred to my colleagues over here before several times, and this may be the last statement that I make. And that is that I'm so glad that there has been some consensus around collaboration and discussion. I believe that that is what this discussion and this panel has served as a catalyst for more than anything. I wholeheartedly agree, and I say this because when I did my legislation, I got a little bombarded by teachers, and I think that my motivation was even questioned, and my lack of concern about teachers was even questioned. And I have teachers who are part of my family, administrators who are part of my family, so I understand what teachers go through. But I think that we all have to look at the big picture, the total equation as we go forward. And that is what I believe having a continuous dialogue around the different components, starting with 0 to 3, including mentoring, understanding that test scores does not make a good school. All of that should be a part of the discussion. I understand, as you said, the frustration of teachers. I understand the frustration of parents, and I understand the frustration of students. I get it. And I believe that we owe it to our students, especially as our #1 priority, to do the best that we can do to further advance an educational system that gives them a holistic education where they are truly learning, not learning tests, but truly learning towards academic success. I believe that that is indeed part of the solution that we cannot ignore. And I close with saying the statement that I started out with. I believe that every child has a right to a quality education in a safe environment and should be treated with dignity. And I believe that every teacher should have a safe environment to offer a quality education, and that they should be treated with dignity as well. I want to thank all of you all who have stayed this long for this discussion today, and that we do everything that we can to move forward to empower our students towards academic success. And I applaud all of you all who are involved at any level in doing that. Thank you very much.
I'd just like to say,
Stand up.
and there's, for me, is I've listened to a lot of what people are saying, and what I hear is that at a point in the past, we had a lot of resources in place that have since been dismantled. We, in the past, have had a program where children with mental health concerns could go and be in a classroom environment, learn how to be on the medication, learn about behavior in the classroom. They reintegrated back into the classroom. We don't have enough social workers in this country right now yet. We're working real hard to get more of those. But two key components that I think are missing to the student side. Number one is vision as to answering the question, what is this education all about? And what's the bottom line? When I graduate from high school, where am I going to be? And that leads into the question of hope. And when we look at all the confusion that's arisen in East Baton Rouge Parish related to Common Core, and all of the back and forth with teachers, and the number of times that their expectations in the classroom regarding the collection of data has changed over the past 6 years, the confusion and the stress and the anxiety can't help but affect the child as the student in that environment, as well as the parents. And so I'm looking at all of that, and I'm seeing the chaos, and I'm seeing things that we need to be looking at as far as creating support in the home environment related to mental health issues, substance abuse, income, finances, all these kind of things. There are resources that are available in the community, but when I've asked the question, how are parents provided that information so that they know where they could go, the school system, that's not their job. So we have these gaps between what's available in the community and what's in the on-site location of the school, where we know that people are seeing where it would be beneficial. There's no transfer of information.
Perhaps that could be one of the first tasks that this newly formed coalition of citizens could take on, and that is, if you will pull the information together, our organization will make sure that we turn it into a useful product, such as the voter guide that we have there. We'll make that commitment. But thank you so much for being here. Please make sure that you sign up over there so we can get in touch. Our next regular scheduled meeting, besides our annual report to the members on the 4th of December, be there at Big Square. We will not meet again until the 4th Thursday of January because we do not want to come on back-to-back with a holiday, and Martin Luther King Day would affect our being able to reach the audience for our topic. So it'll be the 4th week in January in deference to Martin Luther King Day. Yes, sir.
I'm going to make a very short statement. I came here with the expectation that we were going to discuss disciplinary factors as an impediment to the education of students. And I think you heard a bit from that discussion. We talked about a number of other different things. What I want to propose here, because I've not heard it at this point, discipline is a factor that is an impediment. But the primary reason we have this problem with discipline is the lack of focus, the lack of attitude. That's what I want to underscore, the attitude of students. And whatever we do, in a number of different ways, the underlying thing that we should be trying to cultivate in our students are appropriate attitudes that will lead to that success. Attitude, folks. Attitude.
One of the greatest deficits in our economically challenged communities. It's a lack of hope. They see only what is around them, and they don't see a way out. And that is where the doorway to education should help to open that door and broaden it, and creating a safe environment starting very young. My daughter is a special education teacher in Virginia. She teaches special ed children how to life skills at 2 years old. That is offered in the public school system in Virginia. I don't think we have that here. Okay? We have got to play catch up. We have got to put a value on our most important resource, our children. Everything else takes us a back seat. Thank you so much for coming, and if you're not a member, come join us.